Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritartascha tirisvabhigya swarat. Tenne brahmarudaya adhikavaye mujantija suraya. Tejo varim rida jata vinimajo jatra trisargo mrusya. Damna svena sada nirahasta kuhakam satyang param dhimayi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I worship Lord Krishna because he is the absolute truth. I meditate upon Lord Krishna because of solitude. And the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representation of the water in the fire, or land in the water. Because of him, all the material universes. Because of him, the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon Shri Krishna, who is eternal existence in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the reaction of the three modes of material nature, or the material world.
Illusory representations.
Yeah. I finish?
Which is forever free from the illusory representations.
Which are forever free from the illusory representation
of the material world.
Of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravudra.
Dharma projita kaitravudra.
Paramo nirmatsaranam sitam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam
sitam. Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Shivadam tapa trayom mulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayom mulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kimva paririshwaraha.
Kimva paririshwaraha.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Krite bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Krite bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth is the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scriptures?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively, submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Sukhamukhat amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukamukhadam ridadravya sangitam.
Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata bhagavatam rasamrayam.
Muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavukaha.
Mura hora sikabu vibhavuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad
The
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit, the desired trees of Vedic
It
literatures.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the list of Sri Shukadev
Therefore,
Goswami.
this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtanam,
Vidyantaksto hi Upadrani,
Didyantasto Bhadrani,
Nati Suhitsatam.
Virunati Surit
To hear
Satam.
about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic literature,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
One who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotees constantly engaged in hearing with him.
Nastapresu abhadresu
Nasta Prayeshwa Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
bhagavati utamasloke
Bhagavati Utamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develop his dormant transcendental
As
knowledge.
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service to the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadaraja Samobhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayaschaye
cheta itaranavidam
Chitaitar Navidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Sitam Sadve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the modes of passion of ignorance.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And as material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasana manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasipayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When all these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
become enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
siddhyante sarvasamsaya,
Chiyante Sarva Samshaya
siyante chasya karmani,
Chiyante Sasha
krista
Karmani
evatmanishvare.
Raimani Nishwari.
Thus, bhakti yoga severs the heart not of material affection,
That's the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart not to material
and
affections,
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagnam,
and enables one to come at this stage of Samsara Magram,
understanding of the supreme personality of God, understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
understand the supreme absolute true personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, from his devotees in Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of
Srimad
Krishna.
Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 27. Vejanuni sa sutalam vishwamurter
Tvejanuni sulalam vishwamurte
urudvayam vitalam chatalam cha
Urudayam vitalam chatalam cha
mahitalam taj jaganam mahipate
Mahitalam jaganam mahipate
nabastalam nabisaro grinanti.
Nabhastalam nabisharo grinanti.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The knees of the universal form are the planetary system of the name Sutala, and the two thighs are the Vitala and Atala planetary systems. The hips are Mahitala, and the outer space is the depression of his navel. Text 28. Urastalam Jyotiranekam Asya
Urastalam Jyotiranekamasya
Griva Maharvadanam Vajanusya
Griva Maharvadanam Vaijanusya
Tapovaratim Viduradipumsa
Taporaratim Vidur Adipungsa
Satyam tu Shirsani Sahasra Shirsna.
Satyam tu Shirshani Sahasra Srishna.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The chest of the original personality of the gigantic form is the luminary planetary system. His neck is the Mahar planets. His mouth is the Janas planets. And his forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The topmost planetary system, known as Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 heads. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The effulgent luminary planets like the sun and the moon are situated almost in the mid-place of the universe. And as such, they are to be known as the chest of the original gigantic form of the Lord. And above the luminary planets, called also the heavenly places of the universal directorate demigods, are the Mahajanas Tapas planetary systems, and above all, the Satyaloka planetary system, where the chief directors of the modes of material nature reside, namely Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. This Vishnu is known as the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, and he acts as the supersoul in every living being. There are innumerable universes floating on the causal ocean, and in each of them the representation of the Virat form of the Lord is there, along with innumerable suns, moons, heavenly demigods, Brahmas, Vishnus, and Shivas, all of them situated in one part of the inconceivable potency of Lord Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10:42. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, we'll read text 29 also. Indradayo bhava ahur ushra
Indradayo Bhava Ushra
karno disa shrotamamusya sabda
Kano Dishasrutram Anusya Shobdha
na satyadasro paramasya nase
Nasatya Dastro Paramasya Nase
grano syagando mukamagnir idaha.
Grano Shagandho Mukham Agni Ida.
Translation. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sides are his ears, and the physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Aswini Kumaras, and the material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is the blazing fire. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The description of the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead made in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is further explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The description in the Bhagavad Gita 11.30 runs as follows. O Vishnu, I see you are devouring all people in your blazing mouths and covering all the universe by your immeasurable rays, scorching the worlds, you are manifest. End of quote. In that way, Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study for the student of the Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are the science of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are interdependent. The conception of the Virat Purusha, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include all the dominating demigods, as well as the dominated living beings. Even the minutest part of a living being is controlled by the empowered agency of the Lord. That's referring to demigods, empowered agency of the Lord. Since the demigods are included in the gigantic form of the Lord, worship of the Lord, whether in his gigantic material conception or in his eternal transcendental form as Lord Sri Krishna, also appeases the demigods and all of their parts and parcels, as much as watering the root of a tree distributes energy to all of the tree's other parts. So, in other words, what's being implied here is not necessary to offer separate worship for the demigods. One should offer respect to the demigods, but by worshiping Lord Krishna, the demigods are also satisfied. Consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. One need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of different desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. So that last sentence, again, makes the point that Krishna is the primary quality of everything. It's not that the primary qualities are length, width, breadth, density, this thing, that thing. Those are not primary qualities. The primary quality is Krishna, who is maintaining everything, who's present in everything. And even it's not necessary to worship the demigods. One offers respect to the demigods, and one offers Krishna prasadam to the demigods. That's proper respect to the demigods. But one does not have to offer separate worship to the demigods if one worships Krishna correctly. So the real entity is the Lord himself. The sentence before that, it says, one need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of different desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary. Yeah, because everyone in the material world has a temporary body. So when the person is not born, you don't see anything. When the person is born, you begin to see some body, and that body is constantly changing throughout life. And eventually that body disappears. So therefore, when the body disappears, whatever concept you have of that person it's imaginary, because it's not there anymore. Whereas Krishna's body never disappears. Krishna's body never gets old. Krishna's body never deteriorates. So that's the difference between the demigods and the Supreme Lord. Therefore it says the real entity is the Lord himself. And all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. So if you worship Krishna, then everything that depends on Krishna, everyone that depends on Krishna is also satisfied. So, of course, none of this is taught in other so-called Hindu temples because everybody wants to have material prosperity, and that includes health, wealth, and peace, and happiness, and sense gratification, basically. So they don't want to go to Krishna because there's rumors that if you go to Krishna, you'll lose all those things. But if you go to demigods, those things will be sustained and last for a long time. So on that, it's just like, every product has a description that makes it sound as if it's God's gift to humanity. Right? This car or that car, this cell phone or that cell phone, this house or that house, this stock or that stock, and the description of these different products on the market makes it sound as if it's God's gift to humanity. Like, you can't get along without this thing. You must have it, right? And in the same way, people are touting or they're propagandizing worship of the demigods, you know, so, or worship of man gods. So if you go to this one, you know, all your problems will go away. If you go to that one, you'll become rich. If you go to this one, you'll get a beautiful husband or wife. If you go to this one, your business will do very well. You know, and it's the same thing as you go on the internet and you're looking for a product, and every product has its shining description that makes you feel, oh, well, this is it. You know, I have to buy this product. You know, this is the best of the best. Right? So all this propaganda confuses people, and therefore, and because whoever is promising more sense gratification, that's the person people go to. Right? So why does a phony, like so-called Bhagavan Rajneesh, how come he got so many disciples and so many people following? Because he was promising unending sense gratification. You don't have to follow any rules. His theory was this: you don't have to stop sense gratification, you have to increase it. Because eventually you'll get tired of it and then you'll become a sannyasi. That was his philosophy. Did you know that? So that's appealing to everyone, you know. And there are other philosophies like that. There was one German philosopher, but they're not a philosopher, they're philosophers, right? So his theory was that he started ashrams where to join the ashram you had to give everything you had to the ashram leader. And then once you got in, then the rule was no one can deny sense gratification. So if a man walks up to a woman, she's not allowed to say no to him. Now, you can imagine how this attracted a lot of people to those communities. But what happened was the women ended up controlling the community because men cannot have as much sense gratification as women. That's just a fact of life. Because when people become lusty, women win. So therefore, what happened was men all became afraid of the women because they were not able to keep up with them. And therefore the women started controlling all those ashrams. So these are crazy ideas. Don't think that craziness like this doesn't exist in the world. Anything related to sense gratification attracts low-class people. And most people in Kali Yuga are all low-class. For example, when there's an election in India, the party that promises the most sense gratification usually wins. Not all the time, but most of the time. Like, for example, when Modi was running for the second time, the Congress Party promised you don't have to work, the government will give you money. Is this true? Yeah. See? And they promised that. They still lost, but because it's too unbelievable. You know, nobody has to work anymore. The government's going to give you all the money you need. Right. See? But other times they win. Like when Obama ran for president, I think the second time, he promised a cell phone for everybody, free, especially those people who can't afford them. And he won because of that, offering the cell phone and offering this and offering that, you know. So anybody who offers more sense gratification, they usually win. And that's why there's a general degradation of society, morally and ethically, and that's what's happening in the United States now. And that's what happened previously in Greece and in Rome. All those places failed because when people learned that they could vote themselves, perks or access to free sense gratification, then the government fails because people will vote for whoever offers more sense gratification to them. In fact, there was a famous French scholar I think his name was Lafayette, and he was also a statesman, a politician, and he supported the American Revolution. But once they wrote the Constitution of the United States, he wrote a critique of it in which he said there's an inherent flaw in this Constitution, and that is when you have democracy. He said, when the people figure out that they can vote themselves perks or vote themselves benefits like free health care, free education, free this and free that, he said, then it'll fail. Because they'll vote all these things into law, and eventually the government will fail. And he's right. He's absolutely right. In other words, because eventually when people understand the value of their vote to get what they want, it's called everyone should get a piece of the pie. This is the way they say it in low-class people. They, you know, when like Chinese people, and then the Muslims, and the blacks, and then the whites, and when they realize, you know, we got to have a piece of the pie. So whenever there's a new law, it has to include money for the labor, what do you call those guys? Anyway, for different political, let's say, constituents, they all have to get some of that money. Let's say you pass a bill to give money to for AIDS. Well, included in that bill is money for the different partners in getting that bill. Like there's a senator that wants a new bridge in Alaska, so they include that in that bill. Another guy wants to build a new building for the police. They enter that into the bill also. So actually all they needed was maybe $1 billion, but by the time you add all those things, it ends up being $2 billion. That things that have nothing to do with the original purpose of the law are added in. See, in order to pass the law, to get the votes of all the senators or House of Representative persons to vote yes for that law, they have to add all those things in. So this is called pork. Pork means it's like the fat of a pig, right? Okay, so this is the problem with democracy. You get all these different constituents who want a piece of the pie. And to get their vote, you have to give them these what they want. So it ends up inflating the budget of the government. It ends up, like for example, this one senator from Alaska some years ago, he insisted that in some bill that had nothing to do with Alaska, that there should be money to build a bridge in Alaska. So he got the money and he built the bridge. It's called the Bridge to Nowhere. It went from the mainland, Alaska, to some island where nobody lives. But it just so happened that that senator had a mansion built there. But they spent hundreds and millions of dollars to build this bridge to nowhere. You see? So this is why there's so much waste. This is why every year the government spends more money than it has, and therefore they have to keep borrowing money from the Chinese, borrowing money from this bank, that bank, and it's called deficit spending. As long as you can pay the interest, you're not bankrupt. But if one day you can't pay the interest, then the whole system collapses. And that's what happened in Iceland, it happened in Cyprus, and it happens in different countries around the world where they spend much more money and they can't pay the interest on that money. And the same thing happens with your credit card. If you overspend your credit card and the interest is 20%, right? Eventually you can't pay the interest anymore, and then you go bankrupt. And a lot of people go bankrupt in the United States for overspending with credit cards. Prabhupada called credit cards usually it's a bank card, and he called them bankrupt card. Because people will spend, what they do, the trick is, they get one credit card, they max it out, so, but they haven't gone bankrupt yet. So then they get a new credit card to pay the old credit card. And then when the new credit card also maxes out, they get another credit card to pay the other two credit cards. And this goes on until they're completely exhausted and they can't do it anymore. Then they declare bankruptcy. And 1 year after they declared bankruptcy, the same credit card companies send them new credit cards. You see, because the credit companies are backed up by the government, so the government will keep them afloat, and therefore, how does the government make money? It makes money by taxes. So therefore, they keep raising the taxes every year to be able to pay up all these deficits that they guarantee. Anyway, as long as the government can keep borrowing money and pay the interest, it's okay. That's why under Trump, under Obama already, he increased the deficit $9 trillion. And under Trump, he increased the deficit, I think, $12 or $13 trillion. And under Biden, he'll probably increase the deficit maybe $15 trillion, right? So each president is progressively increasing the deficit in the United States. And the only way the United States can get out of this mess is to go to war. When you have a war, everything stops. You see. So that's why periodically there are big wars, because that's the way you can avoid declaring bankruptcy. But basically, in World War II, during that war, the United States government acted like a dictatorship. They put Japanese people in jail who didn't do anything. They didn't do anything wrong. But because they were Japanese, they decided to put them in concentration camps in the United States. And they were thinking of doing it to the Germans also in the United States, but many of the people of German ancestry, they were white, so they didn't do that to them. They only did it to the Japanese, who were, they thought were traitors. So anyway, all these things, I don't want to go into more nonsense that's happened in the past, but this is just to show that unless people focus on Krishna and understand correctly who Krishna is and worship him correctly, they'll deteriorate into demigod worship, as they have done. Or they'll deteriorate into using religion for sense gratification. That's happened in Christianity. It's called prosperity theology, where the preachers preach that God wants you to be rich. And the way you become rich is by tithing the church. Tithing means giving a specific sum of money to the church every month. And then what happens? The guy who's leading the church becomes very rich, and everybody else thinks they're going to get rich by giving money to the church, you see. And that's called prosperity. The only person that becomes prosperous is the pastor or the leader, the charismatic leader of the church. So all these things are based on sense gratification. Okay, so here it says that the description of the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead made in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is further explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we see the connection between Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says, is the postgraduate study. Usually I always would say that Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate study, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is the graduate study, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study. But here Prabhupada says the Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study for the student of the Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are the science of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are interdependent. So when we hear about the Virat Rupa form of Krishna explained in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, more information is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam in two places. This is one place, and later on in this second canto, there'll be more information about the universal form. So this is a preaching strategy for the atheists and for the materialists. They think there's only matter. All the scientists, most of the scientists believe there's only matter. Well, here's a way to direct them to Krishna gradually by understanding the Virat Rupa, temporary manifestation of Krishna in the material world. And once they accept to hear about the Virat Rupa, which is only dealing with matter, right? Nothing spiritual. But it is spiritual because Krishna has this temporary form in the material world. And if they can hear about it, they could say, aha, oh, okay, now I understand why the American Indians worship the Great Spirit. And now I can understand why we are always talking about energy. You know, the scientists are always talking about energy, electrical energy, electromagnetic energy, kinetic energy, potential energy. There's a long list of different energies that the scientists deal with and talk about, and as if they are experts in energy. But all those energies are coming from Krishna originally, and they can see it all happening in the Virat Rupa form of the Lord. So this says, therefore Prabhupada says, the conception of the Virat Purusha, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include all the dominating demigods as well as the dominated living beings. So here's an amalgamation of everything in one person called the Virat Rupa form of the Lord, and therefore people can gradually come to the idea of understanding that Krishna is the source of everything. This is a technique that's very, very brilliant to present to people, and this also encompasses what Einstein was looking for, which was called the unified field theory. A unified field theory is Virat Rupa. So someone who's trained in science and someone who's a devotee who's trained in material science could very well make a presentation of this to the scientific world and gradually get the scientists to accept the existence of the Virat Rupa, which they do in an impersonal way now anyway, but now personalize it as the temporary form of the Lord, and then they would be able to gradually come to Krishna consciousness. That's the technique here. Okay, so now yesterday we also mentioned something that was very interesting that's related to this, because it's in the first canto, first chapter, first verse, the last two paragraphs, which is very interesting, because everyone's interested in sense gratification, and the highest sense gratification in the material world is sex. So here, Prabhupada says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura specifically deals with the original and pure sex psychology, Adi Rasa, devoid of all mundane inebriety, meaning intoxication. The whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. So one day there was a discussion of Freud with Prabhupada and Shyam Sundar and some other devotees, and one of the devotees said, Prabhupada, you know, Freud says that, you know, the motivation of people in the material world is sex. Is that right? I don't know. I don't think that's right. And Prabhupada said, no, he is correct. He is correct. This is why people work hard. Just like American workers work really hard. I was talking to one devotee, and he was telling me that he starts work 7:30 in the morning every day, He doesn't finish till 5:30. And then he goes home, he has something to eat, and then his work starts again 9:30 at night to 12 or 1 o'clock in the night, because he has a team in India. And he said, this has been going on. He said in his company laid off a lot of people as soon as there was the shutdown. But his job was not eliminated. He said, there's a miracle. He said, everyone around me got fired. They kept me. But now, before, I would work from 7:30 in the morning to 3:30. Then I could go home and rest and have time to chant some rounds and this and that. And then I had to deal with my team from 9:30 at night to around 12 or 1 in the morning. But I was able to do it, But now, I don't finish till 5:30 in the afternoon. It takes me some time to get home, and then I have to eat something, and then it starts all over again. He says, I don't know how long I can do this. He says, it's hurting me, and I'm trying to chant my rounds also. So you see, well, I asked him, well, how much money do you make? And he gave some big number. And I said, at one point, you're going to have to tell your employer you can't continue to do this, because it's going to kill you. You can't stay up from 9:30 to 12:30 after having worked already from 7:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. I said, it's not possible. I said, do they pay you overtime? He said, no, they don't pay any overtime. I said, so, but they give him a fairly good salary, but at the expense of his mental and physical health, you see. So, therefore, this is called Marshall's Law of Economics. Marshall was an economist in England, and he said, if you want to have a steady workforce, you have to deal with married people. Because a married man will work like a donkey to maintain his family. But unmarried people, single people, they'll easily quit a job and go to another job, or take rest and maybe come back later on. Or they're not predictable. He said only the married people have debts, because they get credit cards, they buy cars, they buy washing machines, they buy cell phones, they buy a second house. They buy stocks, so they go into debt, and they're forced to work hard. See, that's Marshall's Law. Krishna conscious devotees, or Vedic culture, people did not have to work hard like that, because they followed the principles of Vedic Dharma, and nature cooperated with them. The demigods cooperated with them. That's explained in Bhagavad Gita. Saha yagya prajashistva purava prajapati. So this is the 3rd chapter, verse number 10, which explains very nicely, Ananya Parsavistvadvam Esavosvistakamāduk. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the Prajapati is Lord Vishnu, and he is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds, and all beauties, and the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yajnas, sacrifices, for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in the material world they can live very comfortably without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yajna, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtana Yajna, the chanting of the names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtana Yagya and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32 as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan Yagya. Krishna Varnyam Trisak Krishna Sangapangastra Parsadam Yajnai Sankirtana Parar Yajanti Hisu Medasaha. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yagya. End of quote. Other yagyas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtana Yagya is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended in Bhagavad Gita also 9:14. So here we see the plan of the Lord is you don't have to work hard. That actually, if you follow the Vedic process, and especially Sankirtan Yagya, Krishna will make your life much easier. So you don't have to work so hard, and you have time to chant your rounds. You don't have to work from 7:30 in the morning to 5:30, and then from 9:30 at night to 12:30. That's not life. That's suffering. That's self-mutilation. How long can you live like that? See? So therefore, it's very important to hear why people are working so hard. They're working hard for sex as the ultimate pleasure in life. So it says the whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. In modern civilization, sex life is the focal point for all activities. Wherever one turns his face, he sees sex life predominant. Therefore, sex life is not unreal. Its reality is experienced in the spiritual world. The material sex life is but a perverted reflection of the original fact. The original fact is in the absolute truth, and thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. It is not possible to be impersonal and contain pure sex life. Consequently, the impersonalist philosophers have given indirect impetus to the abominable mundane sex life because they have overstressed the impersonality of the ultimate truth. In other words, when the Mayavadis say that the ultimate destination of life is the impersonal Brahman, all of a sudden they add a huge value to illicit sex in the material world. Because in other words, they're saying there's no sex in the spiritual world. Therefore, you better get it while you got this material body. You see how brilliant Prabhupada is. This is what happens. That's why so many Mayavadis fall down, the big gurus. I'm predicting right now, Satguru is going to fall down. Just like Nityananda fell down, just like Muktananda has fallen down. And we can go through a long list, just like Mahesh Yogi also fell down. And what did they fall down? They didn't fall down only because of like Asaram Baba, smuggling this or smuggling that or killing someone. Or he also had illicit sex too. But he has a much longer rap sheet of crimes. That's why he's in jail. Anyway, they've all fallen down, and they're all big gurus. And also Rajneesh fell down. We can go through a list of all the big Mayavadis who fell down. Why did they fall down? Because they're saying when we achieve Brahman, there's no sex there. So therefore, you may as well get it now while it's available in this life. And also, some ISKCON gurus also fell down because of the same reason. So that is one result of being a Mayavadi. You'll eventually fall down into mundane sense gratification. So, therefore, Prabhupada says, consequently, the impersonalist philosophers have given indirect impetus to the abominable, mundane sex life because they have overstressed the impersonality of the ultimate truth. Consequently, man, without information of the actual spiritual form of sex, has accepted perverted material sex life as the all-in-all. There is a distinction between sex life in the diseased material condition and spiritual sex life. This Srimad Bhagavatam will gradually elevate the unbiased reader to the highest professional stage of transcendence. It will enable him to transcend the three modes of material activities, fruitive actions, speculative philosophy, and worship of functional deities, meaning demigods, as inculcated in Vedic verses. So the Vedas do recommend worship demigods. They do recommend fruitive actions, and they do recommend, in some places, speculative philosophy. These things will be rejected when you read the whole Bhagavatam, and you'll see, and Krishna rejects it also in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says in the he says Triagunya Vishaya Veda Triagunya Bhavarjana Nirdvandva Nityasattvaso Niryoga Shema Atmava. He says, Arjuna, the Vedas deal mainly with the three modes of material nature. Rise above the modes of nature and come to the level of Krishna consciousness, basically. So that's in the second chapter. All right. So anyway, now we're going to go and finish this topic about what is the difference between mundane sex life and spiritual sex. Spiritual sex life is called Madhurya Rasa, but it has nothing to do with mundane sex life. We've read some of this before, but this time we're going to lock it in, like very concretely, so we don't understand the difference. So if we go to Adi Leela chapter 4, verse 33 and 34, Prabhupada, the verse 33 says, Then, by hearing about the pure love of the residents of Raja, devotees will worship me, meaning Krishna, on the path of spontaneous love, abandoning all rituals of religiosity and fruitive activity. And the purport, Prabhupada says, many realized souls, such as Raghunath Das Bhatta and King Kulushakara, who is an Alvar in the Sri Vaishnava tradition, have recommended with great emphasis that one develop this spontaneous love of Godhead, meaning Raga Nuga Bhakti, even at the risk of transgressing all the traditional codes of morality and religiosity. Now, Raga Nuga Bhakti is not something you can jump to. You have to go completely through sadhana bhakti to eventually get there, and you don't know if you get there until the spiritual master says so. You don't get there on your own. You don't buy the ticket, or you don't print the ticket yourself. You have to be bona fide by the parampara to go to that stage of spontaneous love. And you have to be trained by a gopi. In other words, you have to be introduced to the gopis and be trained, just like Goda Devi or Andal was introduced to the gopis and was trained to see Krishna and Radharani. So this is nothing, a person cannot do it on their own. They have to have the certification. Just like you can't get that little badge that says, Microsoft employee number blah, 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 with your name on it and maybe your picture, right? You have to wear it when you walk into Microsoft or these big companies, right? You can imitate. You can go to some print shop and imitate one, but you'll get caught, because it has I think it has some number on it that it has to pass a electronic device to be certified. So you can't jump. Just like I talked about the International Society for Divine Love. They say the goal is love of Krishna, and we'll give it to you right away. On the first day, we'll give it to you right away. You don't have to do this sadhana bhakti nonsense, right? No, it's not like that. And they also write books about Lord Chaitanya. They write they have a commentary. Their guru is given a commentary on a Shiksastakam of Lord Chaitanya. Can you imagine that? Written by a nonsense. So there's no such thing as you jump right to Raganuga Bhakti. Okay, so anyway, it says here, Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis of the Vrindavana, has written in his prayers called the Mana Shiksha that one should simply worship Radha and Krishna with all attention. That's exactly what we're doing, is it not? We're worshiping Radha and Krishna with all attention. We're trying to do that. Na dharmam, na dharmanam, na dharmamam, shrutigana niruktam kila kuru. One should not be much interested in performing Vedic rituals or simply following rules and regulations. King Kalushakara has written similarly in his book Mukunda Malasotra. In other words, the Alvar, King Kalushakara, has written exactly the same thing that Raghunath Das Goswami has written in the Manak Shiksha. And he quotes the verse, it's a long verse, Narta Dharme na vasu nichaya naiva kamo boge, and so forth. I have no attraction for performing religious rituals. Imagine a Sri Vaishnava saying that. I have no attraction for performing religious rituals or holding any earthly kingdom. I do not care for sense enjoyments. Let them appear and disappear in accordance with my previous deeds. My only desire is to be fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, even though I may continue to take birth here, life after life. It sounds exactly like Lord Chaitanya, right? He says, Na danam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani janmani sware, bhavatat bhaktira haitu kitai. He's not even interested in liberation. So now you see the Sri Vaishnavas, the real Sri Vaishnavas, and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have the same siddhanta. They don't have the same sampradaya, but they have the same siddhanta. But that's the real ones, not the phony ones who we see today. Maybe not all of them, but many of them are phonies. They're not actually preaching the philosophy of the Alvars. So, he says, now the next verse, 34. Krishna manifests his eternal human-like form and performs, it doesn't mean he has a human form, it's the human-like, and performs his pastimes to show mercy to the devotees. Having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. And the purport, and this is a very important purport, yesterday when I said your homework was to read the last two paragraphs of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, verse number 1, and then explain the difference between mundane sex and spiritual sex. Okay, so in this purport, this explanation is given. It says, this text is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-36. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable expansions of his transcendental form, who eternally exist in the spiritual world. This material world is only a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, where everything is manifested without inebriety, without intoxication. There, everything is in its original existence, free from the domination of time. Time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world, where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are the recipients of the worship of different living entities in their constitutional spiritual positions. So he's talking about the 5 rasas, basically. There's Santa Rasa, there's Dasya Rasa, there's Sakya Rasa, there's Vatsalya Rasa, and there's Madhurya Rasa. So the spiritual world, these 5 rasas are being engaged in, and the Lord is reciprocating with the devotees in those different rasas. It says, time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are the recipients of the worship of different living entities in their constitutional spiritual positions. In the spiritual world, all existence is unadulterated goodness. The goodness found in the material world is contaminated by the modes of passion and ignorance. So that's a very nice phrase, unadulterated goodness, right? We have goodness cookies, but we might have to change it to unadulterated goodness cookies, right? The saying that the human form of life is the best position for devotional service has its spiritual significance, because only in this form, meaning the human form of life, can a living entity revive his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, even as a demigod, it's harder to revive one's eternal relationship with Krishna than it is in the human form that we have. Well, I mean, the demigods also have a human form in a sense. Not all of them, though. Like Brahma has 4 arms, right? Or 4 heads, excuse me. He has 4 heads. So, but anyway, this human form is very special. The human form is considered the highest state in the cycle of the species of life in the material world. If one takes advantage of this highest kind of material form, one can regain his position of devotional service to the Lord. Now, when we say, let me go back to this one point. When we say that one is not meant to work hard in this world, but caveat, ding, 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 attention. If you get married, you're going to be forced to work hard. Now, we're not discounting marriage. Prabhupada was married also. But just understand, if you get married, you're going to be forced to work hard, at least until your kids grow up and get married and they're independent. So that's a caveat. It's a caveat emptor, which means you have to beware. If you get married, you're going to end up working hard to maintain your family. And if you get married and you decide not to have kids, there was no reason to get married. Prabhupada also says that. There's no reason to get married if you don't want to have children. So you can't cheat. If you're going to get married, then you have to have kids, and then you're going to have to work hard to maintain the children and raise them, hopefully, to become devotees, maintain wife and husband together, maintain, etc. And then after that, if you live properly, you go through the stages: brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. If you go through those, husband and wife go through those stages, then through vanaprastha and total renunciation, you hardly work at all. In other words, hardly work on a job. You're somehow or other, by Krishna's mercy, you're being maintained. And therefore, you have complete time for Krishna consciousness. Incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It says, the saying that human form of life is the best position for devotional service has its special significance, because only in this form can a living entity revive his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The human form is considered the highest state in the cycle of the species of life in the material world. If one takes advantage of this highest kind of material form, one can regain his position of devotional service to the Lord. Incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear in all the species of life. That means Krishna doesn't only appear in the human form. He appears in every species of life, and there's 8,400,000 species. Although this is inconceivable to the human brain, the Lord's pastimes are differentiated according to the appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies of the living entities. So a tree has a certain appreciating capacity of the Lord. Human being has another appreciating capacity of the Lord. The ant has another appreciating capacity of the Lord. The Lord will, the Lord's pastimes are differentiated according to the appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies, the living entities. So, in the time of Jesus Christ, he emphasized, "Thou shalt not kill." Right? Now, is that like the fundamental teaching of Krishna to Arjuna? No. Arjuna was already a cultured person. As a Kshatriya, he only kills in specific conditions. He doesn't indiscriminately kill, even an ant, right? So therefore, you can see how low the people were in Jesus' time. He has to say, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not fornicate with one's mother. Why would he say a thing like that? That's because people were doing it. That's why. Right? So, I mean, no, it's even hard today to imagine someone would do that. It happens, but it's rare, right? But it must not have been rare in the time of Jesus. Otherwise, why did he say that? See? So, these type of things have to be understood, that the level of Arjuna was very, very high, and the level of the people in the time of Jesus was very, very low. Right? And they still don't follow him. They still don't follow, thou shalt not kill. Okay, then it says, the Supreme Lord bestows the most merciful benediction upon human society when he appears in his human form. It is then that humanity gets the opportunity to engage in different kinds of eternal service to the Lord. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of a living entity. So when a person is very attracted to Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, like Bhisma Pitamaha, so that indicates the constitutional position of Bhisma Pitamaha. And when someone is particularly attracted to the friendly relationship of Arjuna and the Gopas to Krishna, that indicates their constitutional position. Okay. Adoration, servitorship, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love are the 5 primary relationships with Krishna. The highest perfectional stage of the conjugal relationship, enriched by many sentiments, gives the maximum relishable mellow to the devotee. This is a big statement. It could take us many years to understand what he's saying there. The Lord appears in different incarnations as a fish, tortoise, and boar, as Parasuram, Lord Rama, Buddha, and so on, to reciprocate the different appreciations of living entities in different stages of evolution. The conjugal relationship of amorous love, called Parakiya Rasa, as opposed to Swakiya Rasa. These are 2 conjugal relationships. Swakiya Rasa is proper marriage with wives, like Krishna with the wives in Dwarka. But Parakiya Rasa is relationship between Krishna and married gopis who are married to husbands. But it's the most relishable transcendental rasa with Krishna. Exactly the opposite in the material world. That's the most abominable thing a person can do, is to engage in sex life with somebody else's wife, or somebody's wife engages with sex life with somebody else other than her husband. That is the worst thing a person can do. But in the spiritual world, that is the highest form of rasa. So you see, there's a major difference between what's happening in the spiritual world and what's happening in the material world. What is the greatest thing in the spiritual world is the worst thing you could do in the material world. So then it says, a class of so-called devotees known as sahajiyas try to imitate the Lord's pastimes, although they have no understanding of the amorous love in his expansions of pleasure potency. Their superficial imitation can create havoc on the path for the advancement of one's spiritual relationship with the Lord. That's exactly what has happened. Every time one of these man gods gets caught having illicit sex, smuggling gold, killing people, etc., it causes havoc. The Muslims are joyful. The Christians are joyful. The Buddhists are joyful. They say, hey, another one went down, as was predictable. And that means many more Hindus are going to convert to our religion, or they become atheists, either way. Material sexual indulgence can never be equated with spiritual love, which is in unadulterated goodness. See, again, he's saying unadulterated goodness. The activities of the sahajiyas simply lower one deeper into the material contamination of the senses and mind. Krishna's transcendental pastimes display eternal servitorship to Ahoksaja, the Supreme Lord, who is beyond all conception through material senses. Materialistic conditioned souls do not understand the transcendental exchanges of love, but they like to indulge in sense gratification in the name of devotional service. You see, I don't actually have to read any more of this, but we can finish this tomorrow. It's getting a little late. But you see, don't think that mundane sex and spiritual sex is the same thing, just because the word sex is used. It's a world of difference. It's like day and night. It's like gold and iron. And unless we understand this difference, we become like these Mayavadi impersonalists, or the Sahajiyas, who think they can imitate Parakya Rasa and get away with it. No, you cannot get away with it. It's not the same thing. And what is the highest thing in the spiritual world is the lowest thing in the material world. And we should not even dare think that it's the same. So we'll hear some more about this tomorrow. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. You want to lead the?
What not?
You want to lead the Arti?
Okay. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Give me the key.
That's your key.
Okay. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalavakati Sadma. Shri Guru Charana Padma. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalavakati Sadma. Bandamoi Sabadana Mate. Bandamoi Sabadana Mate. Jara prasade vai e bhavato riyojai. Krishna prapti ojam hoite. Krishna prapti ojam hoite. Guru Mukha Padma Bhakya Sitete Koriya Akyai. Guru Mukha Guru Mukha Padma Bhakya Sitete Koriya Akyai. Guru Mukha Bhakya Sitete Koriya Arna Koriyo Mane Asha. Arna koriyo mane asha. Mane Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati. Shri Guru Charane Aise Utama. Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati. Prasade pure sarva asha. Jai prasade Jai prasade pure sarva asha. चक्षुधन दिलो ये जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशिता. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशिता. Prema bhakti ja haite avidya vinasa jate. Prema bhakti ja haite avidya vinasa. Prema bhakti ja haite avidya vinasa jate. Avidavena Vede Gaija Racharita. Vede Gaija চরিত শ্রী গুরু করুণা সিন্ধু অধম জনর বন্ধু লোকনাথ লোকেরা জীবন শিলা প্রভুপাদ লোকেরা জীবন প্রভু কর দয়া দয়া মরে Parachaya, Prabhu. Prabhu, Karadoya, Deya Mare, Parachaya. Sagu sukri bhuvana Dupai de laila sharana Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Shila Prabhupada Guru Puja Ki Jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatyadi Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatyadi Shatarine Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya
Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo,
Haribo, Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jaya Vishnupad Paramansa Paravajika Jasta Tarasatara Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Harivilas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Harilam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Samaguru. All glories to the Samaguru. All glories to the Samaguru. Glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana Ki Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He awoke my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter in lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.